Hey YouTube, this is Ben Gessel. How's it going? Just having some kind of lunch here, kind of late breakfast lunch. You can see I'm having some sauerkraut, a little bit of turkey. The beef is all eaten, and like a maybe a fudge bar later on, plus some water and some grape juice. It's organic, whatever. A little pricey, so I watch how much of that have that stuff. Anyway, so I'm gonna get back to this food here in just a sec. But probably warm up the meat a little bit more. It's a bit filling. This sauerkraut's actually pretty good. PCC Natural Markets has a lot of great sauerkraut. Anyway, um, so with this video, I'm talking a little bit about. Let me over here a little bit. I'm talking a little bit about teaching piano lessons specifically. Although some of what I'm talking about, I can apply also to my French horn teaching and other sorts of things like that. But it has to do with when to know, kind of how to gauge someone's ability in music really accurately, um, and knowing where they're at in different areas of technique and their overall playing ability and also other musical abilities that factor into overall ability, um, and just kind of where to place them. Sometimes if you're starting to teach a new student or if you're um, uh, teaching them for a while. And one of the frustrations that some teachers have, I'm sure, is or has to do with the students that don't progress very quickly, or they're not progressing fast enough to merit having um, to merit their attention given to pieces that you're assigning. Even if, I don't know, like everything from primer students that need months and months working on one piece in some cases, to, well, you get the idea. Let's go through this a little bit because this is something I think a lot of teachers do struggle with on some level. Um, so obviously, if you're talking about somebody that you're teaching that has some kind of learning disability, uh, particularly the more severe the learning disability is, the more that you're gonna, and due to legal reasons, you don't always know what's going on with someone unless the parents tell you what's going on with them. But they don't have to, and this is one of those details where I guess um, when I've never really done this, but parents understand that it's okay if your teacher, if you ask a question about a student regarding their if they have a learning disability, um, you just want to be very careful how you ask that question, and just understand that parents don't have to tell you if their kid has a learning disability, or someone doesn't have to tell you if they have a learning disability. They're not legally required to, and well, there's some other things that have to do with this sort of area of law that I'm not. Again, I'm not the best person to tell you guys this, but this is something where you definitely can tell them. I mean, it's definitely okay to ask a question for sure, but you want to tell them. But if you don't feel comfortable telling me, you don't have to tell me, kind of thing. But it's good to ask the question when a student and parent trusts you enough to tell you this, and you keep it confidential, and you apply this information to how you teach music lessons. That's the best way of doing this ethically, I think. But again, nobody has to tell you this sort of thing. But if you notice that somebody has learning disability, or if it's very apparent that someone has a more severe learning disability, if they're, of course, it goes without saying, it's someone's Down syndrome kind of thing, it's going to be any of these things. You're talking about, yeah, going through some of these pieces in the primer beginner levels and level one, level two tops for some people. Maybe beyond that, but it's pretty rare to go beyond that unless they're not quite as impaired. But you're definitely talking about spending months sometimes on one piece. And you might wonder, some piano teachers might wonder if it's really worth it to teach these students. Uh, I myself, I've taught, gosh, how many people here that have some more severe learning disabilities? I've taught, let's see, one, two, three, um, definitely some others. I've taught at the very least so far. I've taught, yeah, again, at the very least, a handful of students that have more severe learning disabilities or have more severe conditions that limit what they can do musically. And then I've taught also over a dozen kids that have other kinds of learning disabilities that are not as impaired, but do affect the nature of music lessons, whether it's some kind of attention deficit disorder or some kind of something that isn't quite as impaired again, but it does affect how we have lessons. So, so yeah, I know a few things about this subject. If you're willing to have the patience to work with a student for months and months on one piece, that is only one line and one note at a time, okay. At some point, you'll probably want to say, "Oh, that's okay. You did fine," and then move on to the next piece. It's probably less likely that you want to spend more than a month on a piece in a primer level book. Just to get everything perfect. But I know you guys have flexibility to kind of do things how you want to do them as teachers, somewhat. Sure. But yeah, I mean, what I found that works for me is for the most impaired students, we only are going to be working. We're probably going to have lessons for not really that long of a period of time anyway. It's probably not going to be years and years with a student that has very serious impairments. That's just the nature of the beast. Music is a little tricky. Now, we can have music lessons for quite a while, in fact. It might work out that it's a year or two. It all depends. It depends on what the parents think also. Parents are ultimately, for kids, parents are ultimately the folks to judge that. The only exceptions with this sort of thing is if as a teacher you have a contract where all students need to teach with you, have to take lessons with you up to a certain period, and then you can decide if you want to keep going or not. And those kinds of things, those contracts don't, of course, they don't work out well with people that just want to take lessons for a short period of time. As it is, I'm increasingly finding that while I don't require contracts from students, I don't really enjoy teaching students for short periods of time because of schedule reasons and other things like that. I like to keep my schedule fairly consistent. So a half year is what I expect usually. But I don't force it. I'm not going to take someone to court, of course, over this sort of thing. I'm not that I don't really agree with that train of thought. But in order to keep things somewhat feasible, I'm discouraging students. I'm discouraging people taking lessons from me if they are only going to be doing this for a short period of time. That's the best way of putting it. So, yeah, I mean, like you can work with you can work with a student at the primer level for years. There are methods that divide up the primer level to like level A and level B. You can get supplementary books, and you can just really yeah. I mean, you can go really slow through these early methods for very impaired students, be they even also adults even. If a student and I'm spending a bit of time on this impaired stuff, and I'm going to go on some other stuff here in a second, I know, but if a student is less impaired, I've found more success working with students that have mental or psychological situations or whatever that, affect music lessons. But I've had a lot of success working with these sorts of students, whether it's some kind of autism, depending on the severity of it. Asperger's syndrome, of course, is actually not a problem at all. I myself have it, and it's actually awesome. This is actually more of a strength and everything. But all the attention deficit types of things and ADHD and these are all situations that students can get sometimes to further levels for a little bit more easily, somewhat more easily. So level 3, level 4, beyond for some, sure, intermediate levels, and sometimes, yeah, going beyond that as well to advanced levels and things. But so, so I haven't had as much issue with just the working on these really basic tunes for a long period of time before they're in pretty good shape. Not so much with these folks, of course. It's what it is. It's more adjusting kind of what I'm saying and how I'm just acting sometimes, and how I'm teaching, and the energy level I'm using for different students that have different conditions, and that that is something where you always want to be observing the student at all times. And if some students are just very quiet and they're very thoughtful, then it's good to use a quieter voice, and you don't want to rush them and let them take their time and learn stuff. That's the best way of handling some of these students. Other students that have a lot of energy, and I do mean a lot, you have to, in order to keep the lesson going, and you have to, in order to keep them focused, you have to use a more elevated voice sometimes, just to keep their attention, and you just have to be rapid fire about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, what piece is next. If making transitions between books, piano technique to theory to whatever, those transitions have to be very quick, and it's not easy. Like, you can ask the student if they have a lot of energy, can you get the next book? Can you get the next book? Where's the next book? And it's helpful to have the parent nearby to discipline if for some kids that just have a tough time with this. And again, a lot of times it's psychological. It's out of their hands. So. But yeah, teaching very, 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 very high energy ADHD students, or there's some students that will not be able to handle lessons just based on having extreme sensitivities and emotional whatever stuff or psychological stuff, and that's okay too. But parents have to realize that sometimes lessons just won't work for certain kinds of students, and it's a tough one because yeah, but so anyway, so getting back to gauging kind of where different students really are at. I found it's not really always a question of, if you're talking about like numbered levels of beginner and early intermediate type, piano courses or whatever. It's not, you don't really always have, I mean, there's definitely not a 100% consensus as to what constitutes primer level, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6, and so on. Yes, there is, but no, there isn't. There's definitely some fluctuation, but you do have kind of a ballpark idea that teachers will can understand. And so let's say you get okay, if you're starting out a brand new student, you've been teaching them for a long time, you realize that maybe they're a little bit further into, they're at a level that's maybe a little bit beyond them. It's not it's not the worst case in the world. You can always go slower at that point, have them mentally catch up as they're working on things. You can always throw in some more supplementary material to kind of lengthen where they are, and lengthen the time period that they're at certain levels, and kind of stop where you're at in that level again, work on music that's other music, and then come back to that same spot a little bit later, and then rinse and repeat if a student just is not progressing as fast as you would like them to. But let's say you get a new student and you're trying to figure out where they're at. Well, we know that there's the musical ear, the ear training, right? There's this auditory side of music that some students excel in. They might have perfect pitch, you know. They might be able to hear music easier. Other students are really great at seeing more complex harmony, bigger chords, more sharps and flats and key signatures, all that kind of stuff. Some students can understand that stuff quicker at a younger level or younger age, or at a higher level. Other students have, of course, rapid fingers or more rhythmic abilities as far as reading rhythms accurately, or again, just fast fingers, or physical traits and skills that are advantageous to playing music at a higher level. And then some students have, I guess you say, more of a more advanced sense of musicality in general, where they can look at a piece of music and understand it at a younger age better than most of their peers, and they can just play more musically and overall than most of the kids their age. And then there are other musical skills. Again, I'm just not thinking off the top of my head. And you have to gauge all this sometimes within the first or second lesson. You know, so how do we do this? Well, we're paying attention to all this stuff. Whenever a student is playing any music for a teacher for the first time, well, you know, whether it's a brand new student that might have certain skills that teacher notices or doesn't notice, you know, the first or second lesson, they will notice hopefully shortly. But whenever a student plays anything, there are all these things that are being communicated to the teacher. And so you, as a teacher, you want to pay attention to everything, to their fingers, to their rhythm, sense of rhythm, are they actually hearing the music in their head? And they see the music, or if they've heard it before, you know, how strong is their melodic ear, you know, and all this stuff. And how good is their sense of rhythm, dynamics, you know, keeping a steady tempo. And yeah, I mean, you can kind of, and if a student is just naturally more intelligent as a person, they have higher IQ, it's going to help them move forward in lessons, of course, much more rapidly. And if you want an accelerated piano course, or if you want, sometimes you have them jump levels even. Again, as a teacher, watching this is your judgment call, of course, and all this stuff, but it's easy just, okay, we're going to jump to here. It's easy to move forward a little bit forward in lessons, but you know, I hold back from doing that if a student is making a few mistakes, more than a few, with their sight reading. They're clearly getting some of what they're reading, but there's enough going on that they'll have to practice it. I would not move a student on if that's happening in where they're at in their methods. I wouldn't. If they're obviously overwhelmed by a piece of music and they just can't play anything, that's probably too advanced for them. But again, the older the student is, the more intelligent they are, more advanced they are, the more I think that might be okay, depending on how committed that student is to what they're doing. Yeah. But yeah, again, with these younger students and with people that have more learning disabilities, you have to take it really slow, and you have to sometimes only be able to talk about the very basic concepts, or you know, you can't force a student to go beyond what they're really capable of doing, you know, obviously. So you have to you have to work with a student at their level. Now you don't have to deal with that stuff so much if you're working with all students that have brighter students that have higher IQs or more advanced, you know, whatever. That's not something you'll have to deal with, but you'll always have to really carefully consider, though, on some level, what a student can handle. And this, even for very skilled instructors, you have to, it's just, it's ultimately a judgment call with repertoire, right? And um, I'm going to say that there's just going to be a lot of just different opinions from different instructors regarding what a student can handle. Me personally, I at a certain point, I would hand off a student to a teacher that just teaches primarily advanced and professional students, or more pre-professional. I mean, really elite students. I would, because at least in the piano, it's not really what I do. On the horn, I'm definitely willing to teach more advanced students, up to pre-professional. Again, at a certain point, I'd hand them off to a college professor, that sort of thing. Composition, there's tons of stuff I could do. So it's not really a question so much with composition. I can handle a lot of stuff with composition, but anybody, a lot of people. But the thing is yeah, we're talking about getting back to the primer levels, intermediate levels, working in level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6. I know the Royal Conservatory of Music has level 7, level 8 and stuff. I don't know all that stuff, but how do you know where any student is at, and should you move them back? Should you have them switch to a different method? I've actually taught a few students before where I've switched methods with them, and it mainly in this case had to do with the rigor of the multi-key approach in, like, say, the Bastion series, and working with students that could not understand the theory as well, behind that method. The multi-key approach requires a student that has a keener music theory mind. If you can't expect some kids to understand, be able to read music with 4 or 5 sharps, and they're only 7 or 8 or 9 or something. Some kids can, other kids can't, and so I've had to switch methods. If the parents understood, I didn't feel embarrassed or anything. I still knew I still knew that I knew what I was doing as a piano teacher. But when you start kids at a very young age, you don't always know what they can handle when they get a bit older. That's part of the train of thought. And with the Bastion series, in general, that's why a lot of teachers don't start students with Bastion until they're a little bit older. And let me see. There's other things I could say about this. It's just that, again, it does work with some students, but you don't always know until you know. The Faber series, for instance, starts to get a lot more intricate at a little bit earlier point in the level 3 and 4 arena, with the nature of with the music that's being assigned. Whereas the Bastion series doesn't have quite as lengthy of bigger pieces in its basic methods, and while there are some, they're not quite as intricate. They don't have as much cross-hand work. It's whatever isn't covered in a basic, like a beginner series, is definitely covered. It goes without saying, should be always covered at the intermediate arena, which can take years and years and years and years and years, right? Easily up until college for many folks, but often not necessarily going all the way up until college for some students. But anyway, of course, the Alfred series is it's been around for a while, and it's well, anyway, I teach out of all 3 methods. And I tend to not change methods unless one method I just can't see a student progressing very much in that method anymore. So that's when I'll change them. But I've done it very rarely, and it's only occurred with Bastion, going from the Bastion method to like the Alfred or Faber methods or a different method. So I understand that there's some cultural things at work here, but I've mentioned this in other videos, I think, or I think you guys are aware of what I'm talking about somewhat. Um, anyway, but oh gosh, yeah. So if I see a student is just kind of plateauing a little bit, I'm gonna have them do more work outside of a method for a while. I'm gonna work on all areas of music. I always try to do that. Try to get a very well-rounded approach to music instruction at a younger age. And then we go back to the method when they're ready to proceed. And we'll have to go, again, sometimes we'll go back and forth a little bit. Some students absolutely must play every note right, kind of thing. And they'll be paralyzed and they'll go very slow. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just fine. The speed will come with time for a lot of students. It's just some students, again, they're very cautious. It's like the skier that just snowplows all the time, and they don't have to. They could actually go beyond that, but they're very cautious about going faster and not being fully in control. I'm my own personality. I am very much falling into this category so often, and what it takes to feel more confident going faster, it's losing the fear of making mistakes. If you make mistakes, you know where they're at. You try to learn how to fix them. It's losing the fear of losing control over what you're doing. But for some kids, and I do emphasize kids here, but also other folks, this fear is very. It just depends on the person, but for some students, it's really it's a big deal, right? And it shouldn't be downplayed. Should not be poo-pooed. Right? It's not. You have to work. Again, you have to work with the student where they're at. You can't expect them to come up to where you're at immediately or quickly or even over the course of a few years. So, yeah, you have to work with where they're at, and you have to know. You have to be patient. You have to. If you're talking about music instruction, especially with beginners and intermediates, and also even advanced students, it's on some level, you have to be patient with everybody. The most serious musicians, the ones that are practicing the most, it still takes it still takes quite a while, right, before they're able to make some dough, and they're known as a professional musician, like they're known. Well, everybody's a little different, and everybody's priorities are different that way. But it's just, and there are probably quite a number of musicians that are pretty amazingly good that just don't make a whole lot of money, if any, in music. So I understand there's a lot of variety here, and there's also different kinds of styles of music, and but again, I'm gonna wrap up this video here in just a second, I promise. But if you guys have any questions, by the way, about the students in your studio, and you want to shoot me some questions, where should the student be noticing this? Should they be at a higher level or a lower level? How do I do that? How do I handle this? You can always ask me questions about your music students, and I'll do my best to help you out. I understand videos probably are not so much of an option due to privacy reasons and stuff. So that's very understandable. But if for whatever reason it's okay to film your student playing, if that's okay with the parents and you want to send a video to me, I don't see any problem with that. As long as it's okay, and I'll keep it confidential. And yeah, definitely I'll have some some feedback for you. So anyway, leave me thoughts and comments below. I'll catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.